Good afternoon again. This is George Freestone with episode 2 of Our Baseball Journey. It's kind of like that wonderful Emerson, Lake and Palmer live album. Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends. Okay. Well, today we're going to embark on the first of the individual baseball visits, and this one's from 1974. But before we get into that one, I'm going to talk a little bit about my attire. The game that we're going to talk about is a Phillies game, and I really don't have a tremendous amount of Phillies gear, but I do have this T-shirt, which commemorates the fine National League performance and victory of the Phillies in that year. And it was also a year that the Mets did very, very well up until the end of the season, where they dropped out of the lead, dropped to the wild card, and then unfortunately lost to the San Diego Padres in the playoffs in the wild card round. However, I do have this T-shirt, which has the 2022 roster behind me, which you can't see right now. But I do want to spend a minute or two talking about my cap, because the only cap that I really have for the Phillies is one of those little plastic ice cream caps that I talked about on the introduction episode. And so I elected to pull out this hat. Now, this hat could be a little bit deceiving. It's actually not a Mets hat. I got this hat in San Francisco when we were at Oracle Park watching the Giants and the Cubs. And like the Boston Braves cap, this actually is a New York Giants cap. But I think it's significant for another reason. If you take a look at the colors of the cap, they're orange and black. Now, that indeed are the colors associated with the San Francisco Giants. The New York Met colors, however, are orange and blue. And it wasn't until I really bought this cap that I understood a little bit about the heritage of those colors. The Mets got their orange from the Giants, the National League club in New York, and they got the blue from the Brooklyn Dodgers, kind of commingling the two National League teams' colors to yield the colors for the New York Mets. Now, the game that we went to here really was a wonderful game. How so? Well, if you just take a look at the rosters of some of the people that were playing in 1974, on the Mets side, you had Rusty Staub, Cleon Jones, Bud Harrelson, Jerry Grody. And who started? But Tom Seaver. On the Philly side, of course, you had Larry Boa, Dale Unser, Greg Luzinski, Bob Boone, Mike Schmidt, and who started? Did the game that I attended? Steve Carlton. So again, just a wonderful game. Now, we'll get into that when I pull up the slide in a minute, but I want to also give some credit where credit is due. When I was talking about updating the presentation for all of these visits, my brother-in-law, Carol's brother, John, suggested to me that I consider breaking it up into serial or episodes or chapters to make it a little bit more accessible. Also allowing people, if they wanted to just view one or another one of the games, they could do so. So, John, that was a wonderful idea, and that is what we're going to try and do here. I guess another linkage that I will offer that ties to the game that we're about to talk about is John Sickett's favorite Met is Tom Seaver, who started this game that we're about to talk about. And finally, I'll link it back to the 22 season. In 2022, at the beginning of the season, the Mets unveiled a statue honoring Tom Seaver at City Park, City Field, or whatever, for the Mets. I think that happened in April. And Tom, unfortunately, I think had passed away by then. He, I think, died in 2020 at age 75. Now, with that, I'm going to call up the single slide that we're going to talk from. And here we go. Okay. Again, in terms of just orientation, you can still see me in the upper right of the screen if you care to. Okay. This game occurred when I was at Lehigh in April of 1974. And Carol and I were a couple. And you can see a picture of us from about that point in time right there in the center. You can also see me as a freshman. I'm sitting at the desk as a freshman, smiling away at you with my Lehigh t-shirt. But by the time of this game in 74, I was on my way to becoming a member of Delta Chi, living in the house and being their steward to plan their menus and coordinate with the cook. Okay, so it just happens that one day we're at Delta Chi and the guys say, hey, you know, the Mets are playing the Phillies today. And I said, that sounds attractive. And then we learned a little bit more about who was going to be pitching, and it was going to be Seaver versus Carlton. So we said, hey, that'd be a good thing. And one of the brothers suggested that he could take us down to the park as he was headed south and would be going relatively close and wouldn't mind diverting and dropping us off at Veterans Stadium, which you can see in the lower left. As the last bullet says on this slide, another fine example of a concrete donut. This one has the concrete donut going all the way around the entire perimeter of the field. Okay, so the good news was we got to ride down to the park. I'm going to save the bad news for a little bit later. I guess there's two really pieces of bad news if you're a Mets fan. First, the fact that the Mets lost the game. As you can read in the third bullet, the Phils win with 2 runs in the bottom of the 9th on a Tony Taylor single and a Mike Schmidt home run. Interestingly, Tug McGraw took the loss. He relieved Tom Seaver, but Tug McGraw was still a Met at this point in time, and he ended up taking the loss. So, okay, we saw a great game. And then it was, how are we going to get back? Well, we knew that we only had to ride one way. But if you can imagine, the three of us looked somewhat like what I looked like in that picture at that desk. And it was April. So if you think about the weather and if you think about when it got dark, this was an afternoon game. It got dark, you know, in the 5, 6 o'clock time frame. Well, there's 3 of us that look maybe a little scruffy, and we have no way back except hitchhiking. So you can see in the upper left there, I found a picture of 3 hitchhikers. And the question that I would ask you to consider is, would you pick up 3 scruffy looking guys out there hitchhiking? I'm fairly certain that we ended up walking between 15 and 20 miles that day before we scored a ride. And as the picture shows, with those imported snowflakes, it was cold enough that it snowed. And so we probably weren't attired for the temperature that it turned out to be in the evening. And we did a fair amount of walking north on 309, trying to get a ride back to Bethlehem and Lehigh University. Well, the outcome of our quest for a ride was a guy in a Mustang stopped to pick us up, the three of us. And lo and behold, this guy was going to a location in Bethlehem, maybe a mile away from where we lived in the Delta Chi house. So we did end up getting back safely to Delta Chi and Lehigh University. We, however, suffered, at least as a Met fan, we suffered a loss at this particular game. So I think we will continue our baseball journey with episode 3.